There's a fascinating story about a Greek immigrant in America named Stamatis. He was told he had terminal cancer with only 6 months to live, so he went back to his home island of Icaria to die. But instead, he re-immersed himself in a tight-knit community, planted a garden, worked contently in nature every day, and ended up living over 100 years old. He was interviewed and asked how he survived terminal cancer. And apparently, he just kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, I don't know. I guess I forgot to die. Now, the implication here is that the joie de vivre, the joy of life, somehow gave him the will to carry on, to live on. Now, if that's really the case, I don't really know, but it does make sense to me because while I had nothing life-threatening like that, I did have this really soul-destroying, protracted withdrawal sensations and chronic pain, and I think the reason they also went away is because I forgot about them. I forgot I was supposed to experience them. That's how they resolved for me. Now, I didn't have a Greek paradise with a low-stress, easygoing community in one of the blue zones, but there are other ways of forgetting that I can talk about today. Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Gustav, and I talk about how it's possible protracted withdrawal sensations are a learned syndrome caused by emotional stress and our belief that there's something wrong with us. Now, I'm not a medical professional, but in my own experience, withdrawal sensations can completely resolve by addressing the emotional tension that maintains the sensations that we're feeling. This is, by the way, a non-pathologizing view of emotions. It's natural to have emotions. Now, today's subject is how protracted withdrawal sensations can almost literally be a bad memory that we just keep remembering over and over again. And also how it's possible to forget this memory so that the sensations go away. Now, we might not suspect, that memory can be involved in lingering withdrawal sensations. Often it's thought there's a drug-related injury and there's nothing we can do about it. But when sensations go on and on, I think this tends to make less and less sense. At least it did for me. And there is this alternative explanation, what's been discovered in chronic pain and related research on mysterious syndromes, and that's that something like withdrawal sensations can actually be learned by the nervous system over a period of time. And this happens when withdrawal brain pathways just fire again and again to the point that they can get wired into the brain's circuitry. It's a form of learning. And when we learn something, it's stored in memory. So when we experience protracted withdrawal sensations, we're recalling a memory. We're viscerally reliving the past. Now, sometimes we might develop new sensations because our memory isn't perfect. Our mind just knows we're supposed to experience something scary. It's like having a recurring nightmare. The details might change, but it's basically the same nightmare. So if withdrawal is a memory or can be a memory, why do we keep reliving it? Why do we keep dreaming it? What activates it? And how can we forget this memory so that it goes away? Now, before I get into how people remember withdrawal, I'll just say that some people seem to experience these sensations all the time, and other people experience them in a pattern of waves and windows. Now, the conventional explanation of waves and windows is that the nervous system is somehow healing itself with this pattern. And for people that this works for, that's great. But personally, I've never really seen this as an explanation that makes total sense to me. People have nonlinear recoveries from many different things. Beyond psychiatric drugs, that are actually explained differently. In persistent pain, for instance, people have flare-ups and flare-downs on their road to recovery. But no one's like, oh, I'm having a flare-up right now. My brain must be really healing a lot. No one really thinks that. So why is this flare-up happening? Or if it's happening all the time, why could that be? Well, I think there are at least 3 things that can explain how withdrawal sensations can be remembered. The first thing that can make us remember withdrawal is emotional stress. A lot of mysterious syndromes now have been found to be caused by an ongoing stress response. In acute withdrawal, there's a danger signal that goes off in the brain, and we feel withdrawal sensations. If we're really scared or stressed out at that time, we can reinforce that danger signal so it keeps going again and again until eventually it's learned. And what fires together wires together. So if we're experiencing stress with withdrawal sensations, then they can wire together. So if we get stressed in any way in our lives, then we might get withdrawal. I think this explains at least one way of how these withdrawal pathways can activate or worsen with stress. Now, sometimes withdrawal sensations might be remembered, out of the blue, even when we don't feel stressed. And I think there's a few reasons for why that could happen. One of which is that deep down inside us, we might be really upset about something or angry about something. And that's what's keeping this danger signal active, that's recalling the withdrawal sensations. John Sarno talked a lot about the role of repressed emotions and how these powerful emotions can get wired to this danger signal as well, because everything in the mind is connected. And all of our memories of feeling unsafe can get connected to each other. In other words, we might be really, really emotionally tense about something, even if we don't always consciously feel that way. There can still be these emotions percolating beneath the surface that might be making our mind feel unsafe. The second thing that can make us recall withdrawal memories, often, again, out of the blue, is conditioned responses. So our brains operate with something theorized as predictive coding. Our minds are constantly trying to predict what's going to happen next. The mind does this so it doesn't have to build a new model of reality every time we experience something. So if we already just used something that's already programmed, something that's already there, that's more efficient. So for us, this can mean that our minds can actually predict when we'll experience withdrawal, and it can actually make that happen. So the mind might think, for instance, oh, it's morning time, so it's time for withdrawal sensations to be remembered. Maybe this is because we had acute withdrawal one morning that left an impression on us, or some stressful unconscious mind activity was going on before we woke up. And remember, our stress can create or remember withdrawal sensations because they're wired together. So if we wake up one morning with withdrawal sensations, then the brain learns maybe that's the way things are supposed to be in the morning. And then maybe we go online and other people are experiencing a bad time in the morning as well. And this reinforces this idea, reinforces this prediction. And then we live every day like it's Groundhog Day, because that's what our brains are expecting. I used to wake up in the night all the time with my arm feeling numb. That happened for years. I wasn't sleeping funny, it was just a conditioned response. Now, similarly, withdrawal sensations can also be associated with people or concepts or food or exercise or what have you. So we might not feel any conscious emotional stress at all. Then suddenly a conditioned response happens and we go back into the withdrawal dream. Now, if we're feeling withdrawal sensations all the time, then maybe the mind is predicting withdrawal sensations all the time. It's just become its habit. So they might feel constant because the mind is stuck in this loop of fear and anticipation of sensations. In this case, it might feel like we're stuck in a timeless void, like we've fallen into eternal suffering. Now, if this is what the mind is predicting, and we believe it, and that's very important, that we believe this is an accurate prediction, that this is our inevitable fate, well, that leads me to my final point of remembrance here. When withdrawal sensations are happening and they're so scary and we don't know why, we can assume that we're physically damaged in some way. And if our interpretation is that something is seriously wrong with us, this reinforces this danger signal, this stress response. So our meaning making, how we make sense of our situation, can be very important in maintaining mysterious sensations that just go on and on. If we think then that we have, something like protracted withdrawal syndrome and there's nothing we can do about it, and that the only healer is time, then what is the mind going to predict? It's going to predict withdrawal. We're helping fulfill this prediction. We're feeding into the prediction of withdrawal and suffering when we believe this. We're buying into the withdrawal nightmare as our reality, as opposed to understanding it as a bad memory or a nightmare. But it's possible to wake up and forget this dream or have only the vaguest memories of it. That's certainly how I feel now. When I try to remember my previous withdrawal experiences, I have to make a real effort to try to remember them. And I don't even want to do that anyway. But the point is that there's such a distant memory now that it's just now forgotten. Forgetting painful things is something humans long to do. Think of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, a very popular film based on the idea that it's possible to go into the mind to delete specific painful memories. Now, the film also shows all the negative implications of that, but I'm sure if I could have went back in time, or if somehow I had access to some sci-fi machine that could have deleted withdrawal memories that I experienced, back then, I certainly would have done that. But in reality, intentional forgetting is actually quite hard to do. In fact, the harder we try to forget, the more we might remember. It's like saying don't think of a pink elephant, which paradoxically, might make people picture that in their heads. Sometimes what we resist might persist. So in our situation, what I mean is if we're trying too hard to forget, that is, if we're trying too hard to fix ourselves, if we're in constant problem-solving mode, if we're researching frantically about what's wrong with us, this will only reinforce the danger signal that's remembering the sensations. It's keeping the nightmare going. Or on top of that, the more that we avoid things, I can't do this, I can't do that, or I can't eat that, all the people on the forum saying I did X and it made me worse. The more we get away from immersing ourselves in the world and living our desired lives, the more we get away from ourselves. Ultimately, we can get so focused on withdrawal sensations that we can forget ourselves. We forget who we are, what our purpose is, the people in our lives, what we want to do, all of that and more. So the way to forget withdrawal is to remember ourselves. We forget withdrawal by remembering ourselves. It's a process where we forget the sensations because they're not a natural part of us. They're distracting us from ourselves. In fact, once we stop caring about the sensations, that's when we can forget them. So how do we remember ourselves to do this? Well, for one, we have to remember that we're healthy. As far as I know, protracted withdrawal sensations are medically unexplainable. Most of us get checked out by physicians and nothing is found wrong with us. Yes, there are some beyond awful experiences and even visible things like I had a lot of stuff wrong with my skin. But it was not caused by anything fundamentally being wrong with me. It was just a stress response. So in remembering that we're healthy, this counteracts this danger signal, this stress response that's making us believe something is wrong with us. Now, to do this sort of self-remembering, we might have to forget about internet-constructed identities, like I have protracted withdrawal syndrome, or other related identities that might be holding ourselves back from our authentic selves from re-emerging. I've heard it said before that those who tend to get withdrawal sensations, or whatever sensations, the worst, or the longest perhaps I should say, are the ones who become experts on what's wrong with us. We self-diagnose and hold on so tightly to this idea that something is wrong with us, and there is just nothing we can do about it. So maybe this idea needs to be forgotten so that we can remember that we are fundamentally healthy. Now, what we can also do to remember ourselves is acknowledge the events that have happened in our lives that have made us feel unsafe. Our reactions to these events might have generated some really powerful emotions, keeping this stress response going. And this stress response, again, is what's maintaining the sensations. And sometimes we're not even aware of all this emotional activity or emotions going on because emotions can be repressed, because they're just too painful to deal with. This is a massive part of John Sarno's concept, the Mindbody Syndrome. So when we focus on withdrawal sensations, become distracted by them, we miss the message coming from our nervous systems, from the sensations, that we're really upset about something. That's the message. Something's not right. Something needs to be addressed. And by receiving this message, we remember ourselves. We remember our life experiences and how they can affect us. Maybe it's something from the past. Maybe it's something more recent. I always talk about my rage towards psychiatry. The mind, I think, wants us to hear its message. It wants to be comforted. We want to be comforted. Self-compassion is huge here. We can remind the mind that it's safe, that we're safe, and that it's safe to have emotions, and that this danger signal can be turned off. And again, this is a process. I'm not suggesting that we can, just forget these sensations overnight or right away. It takes time to forget them because it takes time to understand this message. Now, another thing we might need to remember is that we can have conditioned responses. So if we find ourselves routinely reacting negatively to something, we might forget ourselves if we just kind of always pass it off as protracted withdrawal, as opposed to understanding we have a hypersensitized nervous system because we're under constant stress. So of course we'll have lots of adverse reactions if we're stressed out and just scared, of everything. That's just what's going to happen. But when we become aware that our mind is predicting danger, again, we can talk to our minds and say, yes, I know you think this is dangerous, but it's actually safe. I'm safe. Alternatively, if we notice our conditioned thoughts, conditioned thoughts might be a response to a withdrawal sensation or just a thought saying, oh, there's something wrong with us, they're damaged, something like that, then we can respond to our mind and say, hey, mind, we don't need to go down that route again. We've been there, you've told me these things before, and I'm just no longer going to take them seriously. Or we can read or listen to a Sarno book or a particular TMS book or podcast or video that you like and get this message in there again and again and again, because it's repetition, because we're re-teaching our minds that we're safe. Finally, I think we might have to remember the stuff we like to do and get back to doing the things we used to find fun and enjoyable. Back to human relationships, back to activities. Once I started learning about these mind-body concepts and started to understand them on a deeper level, I could use them to give myself some confidence to return to some of the things in my life. I could then start, at least to some degree, getting lost in activities again. And it's great to have activities that are second nature that you can get lost in. So I would start to do one, get engaged, and do it for a while. And then after a little time passed or some time passed, I would suddenly think or remember, oh, I haven't had any withdrawal sensations in the last hour or last little while. That's weird. Where did they go? And that's kind of how it worked for myself. I didn't notice the withdrawal sensations going away as they were going away. It was more in retrospect. It was more noticing afterwards, oh, what's that? They're not there? So what happened is I forgot them. I forgot that I was supposed to have them. This is how it happened for myself. I just started to forget about them as I was living life. And each time I forgot them, the withdrawal memory faded away more and more. It was no effort to forget them. The effort was toward remembering who I was and returning to living. And as time went on, I stopped caring about them. And then I stopped even noticing whether I had withdrawal sensations at all, because I had moved on. It was over. It was forgotten. And all that remained was myself. So to bring this back around, I didn't realize I'd be talking for this long, but when I think about this Greek guy with terminal cancer who says he forgot to die, well, I think maybe he forgot to die because he remembered how to live. And when we learn to remember ourselves, remember how we want to live, and actually do it, I think it's possible to forget the stuff antagonistic to living life. So I hope that might provide some idea of how this is possible, and I wish you the best of luck in your process of remembering yourself. I think this process of remembering ourselves can be essential to the resolution of protracted withdrawal sensations.